Greetings, everyone. I thank you for joining me and all the other speakers today. I can't recall a time in my life when this country endangered the world on so many different fronts. The recent attacks by the US government on China are unprecedented, even for a nation with such a deeply retrograde history. The new COVID-19 virus became the rationale for rhetorical attacks by the president, the Congress, and the corporate media. It isn't just mega hat-wearing deplorables who have encouraged xenophobia, smears, and bigotry. The coalescing of the political duopoly into a unipolar imperial partnership with no pretense of opposition feeds into this process. The Republicans and Democrats try to outdo one another in competition to see who can denounce China more. Donald Trump and Joe Biden both vie with one another, alleging that the other is insufficiently bellicose towards China's government, now often referred to as the Chinese Communist Party, a term which has clearly scored well in focus groups. There is even proposed congressional legislation, the Name the Enemy Act, which would require federal documents to refer to Xi Jinping as the president of the People's Republic, preventing him from being referred to as the president of the People's Republic of China. He would have to be called the General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party. I think we're back in Freedom Fries territory. The end result is, of course, increased racism here in the US, something which isn't difficult to accomplish in a country whose very founding was a result of attempts at extermination and enslavement of millions of people. People of Asian heritage are never regarded as being fully American. Only people of European ancestry are considered as such and thought to be worthy of rights and respect. The Chinese Exclusion Act actually targeted Chinese people in an effort to prohibit their immigration for some 60 years, from 1882 to 1943. I recall an Asian colleague of mine telling me that even here in the enlightened and liberal New York City, she's often told that she speaks English very well. She's a fourth-generation American, but to many people, she still belongs in the other category. Obviously, we must call out racism when we see it, but we have another obligation, and that is to reject American imperialism, which is often the means of encouraging racist thoughts and action. It is opposition to aggression committed on a mass scale that will stop racism, whether that bigotry is expressed against people of Asian ancestry or anyone else. We are watching in real time a hybrid war, and not the first, committed by the Trump administration with the full support of the Democratic Party. That is often the root of hatred and resentments. It isn't enough to condemn racism. We cannot be mere do-gooders pleading for tolerance. In just the last 2 months, the US closed the Chinese consulate in Houston, snatched US control of TikTok from Tencent to an American business, pressured vassal state allies to undermine their own relationships with Huawei and continue a relentless propaganda campaign to give the appearance that China has 1 million people imprisoned in Xinjiang. Of course, the US has imprisoned more than 2 million people in its own mass incarceration system. That is documented and beyond doubt. But if no one speaks up for the more than 1 million Black people who are incarcerated here, we shouldn't be surprised that anti-China sentiment exists in a country where white supremacy is normalized. Foreign policy cannot be considered a frill. We cannot have defense spending eating up 60% of the discretionary budget and expect to have our human needs met. We cannot allow political parties to demonize other nations and then express shock when racists here are emboldened. This dynamic doesn't apply only to China, but to people all over the world whose governments are demonized in order for the two war parties to convince us to engage in acts of aggression. We must work for peace, vote for peace, and not be fooled by pleas to back one of the war parties over the other. We must fight imperialism, fight the 800 US bases all over the world, and fight for our human rights. If we are in solidarity and commit ourselves to peace, anti-Chinese racism and all racism may become a thing of the past. Thank you very much.